noticed about Barnes in media day that I've also noticed in any other piece of media he's done in the summer is that he is bought in on improving himself and being a much bigger factor in the team this season. And I need to really explain why and predict what we're actually going to see from the player. So obviously the big story from the Raptors this summer is the team losing Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet was a significant part of this franchise and its history, a significant part of the team last year, walked away for nothing. The team is naturally going to look very different without that player. Also, by having a new coach, the team is going to look extremely different too. So he has been consistently asked about Fred VanVleet leaving. And what every other player has done, and I'm not saying what Barnes did was bad. I'm not saying that in any way whatsoever. What other players typically do when they're asked about Fred VanVleet leaving is they're saying that they got to work to replace him. They have to, it's a loss, big part of the team, like leadership figure. We got to work to replace him. But when it comes to Scottie Barnes, when he's asked about Fred VanVleet leaving, and he's done this multiple times this summer, he talks about himself. I'm not saying this is bad. I think this is good. But the quote here on Fred VanVleet leaving is that there's more opportunity for him, something he can step into. It's not that hard, I feel like, for me to be a leader. And of course, we have other vets in the team so they can help out as well. So with Scottie Barnes, Fred VanVleet leaving, and I think this is a healthy way to approach it. He's not really looking at it like a loss for the team as much. He's looking at it as an opportunity for himself to go into that role, to step up into that role. And I think that's very, very good to see. Clearly, Barnes feels as though last season he could have performed better. I think we can all agree that he should have and could have performed better. Definitely, we should feel that way. And I think he's prepared to take a big step up. So what we really need to see from Scottie Barnes this year that's going to be different than what we saw last year. There were some certain games where he had the opportunity to step up into this figure when there were some games that Fred VanVleet wasn't playing, Fred VanVleet missing through injury, or just in general. Like there's a lot of games where Fred VanVleet significantly underperformed and we needed somebody else to step up. A lot of times Barnes did the fourth quarter, but can we get it throughout the whole game? So I really like the way Scottie Barnes is kind of framing all this as the opportunity for himself to step into a much, much bigger role. And I think that this is the perfect coach to allow him to do that. So Barnes also spoke about having the ball in his hands more often, being able to play make more. He feels like he's a great player with the ball in his hands. And for Barnes, I mean, we all know at this point, he plays a point guard in college with Florida State. He was sixth man of the year there, but he played as a point guard. And Barnes himself envisions himself and sees himself as a point guard. He doesn't think he's a forward. He sees himself as a point guard. So perhaps having the ball in his hands a little bit more often, being point guard by committee, filling the void by committee of Fred VanVleet leaving, I think that having him on the ball a lot more is going to do a lot of wonders for his confidence. And I'm excited to see what a much more confident Scottie Barnes looks like, because I think the aggression was the biggest thing that kind of hampered his offensive abilities last season. Like when he was aggressive, tenacious, we saw like some fourth quarters where he just exploded. But can we get that on a consistent basis, game by game, through the entire game rather than just the fourth quarter? I think we are going to see a much more of that this year. And I think that whole confidence, the whole vibe, he spoke about being a leader, that's just going to carry over to the rest of the team as well. So I think that there's a lot of great things here that are going to be put into place as a result of Scottie Barnes having the ball a little bit more. I don't think he's the greatest half-court offensive initiator, but is this going to allow him to be better in other endeavors of his game? Potentially. And I think that's an exciting thing to monitor going forward. And just for the sake of it, we want to talk about the selfishness here, and specifically what does Scottie Barnes have to say about that? This made me think. Scottie Barnes said, sometimes when we're out there, it feels like it's every man for themselves. He's not the only player who said that, by the way. But I feel like Darko has done a good job of incorporating that into the offense. It makes you feel more comfortable sacrificing for each other when the ball is moving. So I think a lot of people on the Fred VanVleet situation, it just seemed like everybody is relishing the opportunity to have more touches, and that now the other four guys who were in the starting five last year are all just going to have their roles upgraded a little bit more. And perhaps it felt like last year, because directly he's referencing Darko Rajakovic and saying Darko's done a good job of incorporating that into the offense. Whereas last year, to me, it really felt like the Nick Nurse offense very much was, okay, let's get an isolation for Pascal. A lot of those. Let's get an isolation for Fred VanVleet, particularly in late game situations, and particularly, even more particularly, in the late game situations of the play-in tournament game where the Raptors ultimately fall to the Chicago Bulls. Like, the late game of the Bulls was straight up, get the ball to Fred and let him cook. And my guy was not serving up a great meal in the late stage of that game. Despite having a good first 3 quarters, we diverted away from actually playing as a team and went to the isolation stuff. So I think that now that we have Darko kind of really promoting this team offense, one thing that Darko did mention over the course of media day as well was the fact that he does not like isolation. Darko is a pick and roll guy. For the last 3 years, his teams have led the league in pick and roll. Like, this is what Darko said specifically about isolation. We're going to try and move the ball more. We're going to try and implement a 0.5 offense, and we'll really try to execute in the half court with a lot of basketball. I don't like iso ball. So I think that's going to be refreshing. Very refreshing for Raptors fans to see, and a very refreshing piece for the players, as highlighted there by Scottie Barnes. I think Scottie is rushing things. He just wants to be the man so bad. That's not a good sign. I think I felt like that was a lot of the early season struggles for him this year. And communication with the coach is going to be essential here. But yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of an understanding that, well, sure, Scottie Barnes is a good player. Last season, Fred VanVleet was still the better player. Pascal Siakam was comfortably still the better player. So, it's difficult sometimes coming into the league where for the first 20 years of your life, you've been the best player on your team, always, by far. Well, now you have to play with guys who are better than you and find more of a role. So I think, once again, it's going back to the whole conversations about the selfishness thing with Fred VanVleet. And the whole thing stemmed from, it seemed like there was an argument in the locker room where the older guys, you would think, VanVleet and Siakam, had some harsh words towards the younger guys, like Scottie Barnes, likely involved over there. And that's where maybe a bit of a clash started to form. Did the older guys come on too strong? I would say that's likely. But also, can you hold some of the younger players accountable to a certain degree? I think that also could be true about this situation. I think that does apply to Scottie Barnes because it did feel like there was an effort issue at times. Was that an aggression issue? Was that a conditioning issue? All of these things, we don't know. But a whole offseason here to start fresh. Again, new coach, new point guard, new team outlook, fresh mindset. And I think that Darko has taken strides already here. And we're really seeing that evoked with Scottie Barnes. Darko has taken strides here into trying to reset the culture, create a brand new brand of offense for this team. And a player like Scottie Barnes, I think, will relish the opportunity to be a part of it and will relish the opportunity to be heavily involved with the offense with the ball in his hands as well.